Home Assistant is a great home automation platform, but did you know you can also use it to monitor things in your HomeLab? Now, I'm not talking about temperature sensors you add to your environment or toggling lights on and off, although you can do that. I'm talking about monitoring the machines and systems you use in your HomeLab and customizing a dashboard just for you. Home Assistant has hundreds of integrations you can add, and many of our favorite HomeLab services like Proxmox, PiHole, Plex, UniFi Network and pfSense, TrueNAS, Docker, and more. Using those integrations, we can then create dashboards in Home Assistant dedicated to just your HomeLab services. This lets you see information at a glance, like your network speed, or how much memory your firewall is using, or how many people are watching movies on your Plex server, or even something interactive like a toggle to quickly disable PiHole blocking and then turn it back on. There are so many ways that you can configure your dashboard that the possibilities are mind-boggling. And if it seems a little overwhelming, don't worry. You don't need to know anything about Home Assistant, and if you do, that's just a plus. We're going to walk through configuring lots of services, and to make this even easier, Home Assistant can suggest cards for your dashboard to help you get started fast. So I'm calling this a HomeLab Assistant, the dashboard for all of your HomeLab services. Oh, I forgot to mention that it works with the Home Assistant app too, so you can easily take all of this actionable information with you. First, you'll need to have Home Assistant installed. Now, you can install it on a Raspberry Pi, physical machine, Docker, LXC, or any way that you like. Another thing you'll want to do is install hacks for Home Assistant. Now, I'm not talking about hacking your Home Assistant server, although debatable whether it's hacking it or not. But Hacks is the Home Assistant community store, and it lets you install a lot of other applications that are outside of the main Home Assistant app store. Super easy to install, get that installed, and then you're good to go. Oh, and I'll have all of the instructions on how to install this in my documentation, and you can find that below. And we don't need hacks for all of the applications, but I figure we may as well install it ahead of time so I don't have to explain it later. So after landing on your Home Assistant dashboard, you'll see an overview page. Now you're seeing a lot of the IoT devices that I have and the dashboard that I've configured for my home. However, I don't want to add my HomeLab services to this dashboard, so we should create another one. So if we go into settings and then we go into dashboards, you can see all of the dashboards that I have here. Now let's create another dashboard. Let's say a new dashboard from scratch. We can name it anything we want. I'm going to name mine HomeLab. And then you could give it an icon if you like. And then you can customize the URL if you want. So let's now create our dashboard. You can see we have our new HomeLab dashboard here, and we can open it up and we see that it's blank. So the first thing that I want to monitor is the system itself that is running Home Assistant, and we can do that using the system monitor. So how do we find that? Well, let's go into settings and let's go into devices and services. You can see I have a lot here, but you'll want to add an integration and you want to find system monitor. Now it will create an initial configuration for you, and it will add a card here to your integrations. If you go into there, you can configure it some more. And you can add or remove entities. And if you want to see the entities that are configured with this service, if we go into here, we can see a lot of metrics about our system. Now we could create a custom card for this and add all of these entities individually, but I'll show you a shortcut. If we go back and we actually go into the service, you can see that I have this nice diagnostic card right here, and we can actually just add this to our dashboard. Let's do that really quick to see what it looks like. So let's add a dashboard. We're going to choose our dashboard, right? I just created the HomeLab one, so let's add it there. Let's say next. And here we can see a preview of what that card will look like. Now you can pick a different card if you'd like to. I'm going to stick with this one for now. We'll customize some cards later, but we can just click add to dashboard and that added to our dashboard. If we go to our HomeLab dashboard, we can now see it. So pretty cool. We're already monitoring this system with just a couple of clicks. The cool thing about this is too, if you click on these, you get additional details. So let's see the memory use for this system over time. Now I've had this installed and running for a while, but you can see the memory use over time. You can actually see right here, I just rebooted it accidentally a little bit ago. And my wife asked me, is Plex down? You could also click show more and see it over more time. So I've actually had this running for a few weeks now. Let's look over the last month and you can see the memory usage of the system over time. And you can see here, about 10 days ago, I installed and configured this. You could see some spikes and back down when I probably rebooted, back up, and a reboot. All of these drops here are probably reboots, but pretty cool. You get this out of the box with all of these metrics. If you want to see network throughput, so this is the coming in. Right now it's at 1 megabyte per second. You could see it more over time. And again, you could zoom back out if you want to. And if you wanted to edit this card, you just click on the pencil to edit your dashboard. And then you can edit this card and you can add more items to it. Let's say I wanted to add a new entity to this. And then I'm going to filter on system monitor because I'm seeing all of my sensors here. I'm just going to add disk free, just pretend I had another monitor. And you can see it appear right here. You're getting a preview as you do it. And then you can save it if you like. And then you can click done. And now you have this new monitor here. And you can see my disk free. Over time, I have 60 gigs. Pretty cool. So a really quick way to monitor the system that we're on. Another thing that I like to monitor is other Docker containers. Now I can monitor all of the other Docker containers that are also running on this machine. Pretty awesome. And you get a lot of metrics about those that you otherwise would know. So you get a lot of visibility into your Docker containers. Even if you're not running Docker, I think there's some interesting things that you'll see here when we get to the metrics. So the way we install it is through Hacks, because this is a community store plugin. And you would search for Docker within here. I already have it installed. You would choose Docker, and then you would install this plugin. So one thing you'll have to do, and I forgot to do this at first, is you'll have to map Home Assistant to the Docker socket, the process on the host machine, so that it can discover and find those other containers. That's the one thing you'll have to do. Then you'll have to restart your container if you're running it in Docker. So once you install this plugin, it's not really installed. I think what they do is install it to where you can then install it using Home Assistant's App Store. A little bit confusing, but once you do it a few times, you'll realize that that's what's going on. So we install this plugin, then we'll want to go into settings, then we'll want to go to devices and services, then we'll want to add integration, and then we'll want to search for Docker. Then you'll install it that way. So really what Hacks is doing is making it available in the default integration or app store within Home Assistant. And then once you get here, sometimes they don't even need to be installed. They just need to be configured. So like this one, it can't be configured from the UI, and they ask you to open documentation, which is pretty simple to follow. And it just asks you to modify a configuration file and add some of these attributes here. So to configure it now, all we need to do is go into our configuration file for Home Assistant and add something like this. So I'll show you mine. So if we go into my configuration for Home Assistant, then I have a monitor Docker section, and you can see right here, I'm monitoring some of these services. So I've actually set it up to filter out some of them. And then I've done this rename so I can rename them and make them look pretty on the dashboard. And you can play with this and do a lot of different things, and you can see that in the documentation. But for the most part, you just have to list your services. And then what I typically do is go into the developer tools, check my configuration to make sure I didn't make any errors in YAML, which is easy to do. And then I just restart Home Assistant. Then when it comes back up, let's go back to services, and then let's go into monitor Docker. And now we should see some entities listed here. So if we go into entities, you could see a lot of different pieces that I'm now monitoring, which is pretty cool, down to the container level. So I can see the Plex CPU that's being used just by this container, how much memory it's being used just by this container, the network speed up and down. So this is really cool that you get down to the container level and you can monitor things like this. So to create a card, unfortunately, it doesn't give us, a nice way to create some of these cards. We can just go back to our dashboard. Let's create a new one. I'm just going to add a card. Then we can pick by card or by entity. I think I'll do by entity, and let's type in Docker to get a good filter. So if I filter on Docker, I can see some of the sensors for Docker, the process itself. So let me add a couple of these. Containers total, container stop, containers running, container pause. Sure, that sounds good. And then we can also see the individual containers too. So let's say, for instance, I wanted to also add Plex. So I have a switch for Plex. This is where I can actually start and stop the container, which is pretty cool. I'll say the CPU, the health, the version that we're running, memory, and there's a lot of stuff we can do. Let's do speed up and speed down. Let's do that. Oh, and we can also see state, and we can see status and uptime. So a lot of stuff. So let's continue and add this. And here we can see the card that we're going to add to our dashboard. And for now, let's add it to the dashboard. And once we add this, now we're monitoring the Plex container along with some of the other Docker stats itself. Now, the cool thing is if you wanted to monitor Plex by itself in a card, scripted in another card, Home Assistant in another card, homepage in another card, you totally could. And so you don't have to add them all to this card. And you could do lots of different things with this too. But remember, not only are we getting this data, but we're also getting the history over time from these metrics. So how much Plex CPU have I used over time? You can see here, right now I'm using 2.56, but since I've had this running for a while, I have some history. And you can see over time, I'm using, I was using a lot right there. Yeah, so I'm using 1000%. So 13 cores, I guess? I'm not really sure. Something went crazy, or 10 cores there. Something went crazy there, but who knows? Maybe it was. And if I wanted to stop the Plex container right now, I could click this toggle and my wife will start yelling here in a little bit. And then I could click it back on through here too. So pretty cool. Not only do you get all of this data, but I could start and stop the container if I want to. And like I mentioned, if we wanted to add a dedicated card, let's say we wanted to add a card for just traffic. I want to see just traffic on this card. I want to see how much CPU, if it's healthy, how much memory, and what speed it's actually transferring on, speed up and down, and its state, status, and uptime. Sure, why not? Do I have the switch? And then a switch whether or not I want to toggle it on and off. Continue. Let's add the dashboard. Click done. And so now I have a dedicated traffic card that shows me how much CPU it's using. The health check is unknown right now. I don't know if this has a health check, but it might take some time to kick in. If it doesn't, I should probably add one. How much memory it's using. How much network speed up and down the reverse proxy itself is using. How long it's been up. It's because I rebooted that server. I had some good uptime right before I rebooted it. I think I was up to 44 days. And then whether or not it's running. I could actually toggle this off right now and you could see it won't be running and toggle it back on, but trust me, it works. Cool, so that's Docker. What's something else I use in my HomeLab? Well, it's TrueNAS. So TrueNAS has an integration here too, and it's really awesome. So let's go into Hacks again, because this is in Hacks. We would search for TrueNAS, find it here. We would then install it from here, and that would just make it available in the store. Once you install it, then you'll go back to Settings, go into Devices and Services, and then you would add integration, and you would type TrueNAS, and this would install it here for you. And for TrueNAS, you're going to have to generate an API key. That's in the documentation. I'm not going to show it. Super simple to do. But after you generate an API key, you'll just put in the IP address. Whether or not you want to use SSL, yes, you do. And whether or not to verify it, if you're using self-signed, you'll have to. If you're going through a reverse proxy that is trusted, you won't have to. Anyways, after you add TrueNAS, let's take a look and see what we have. If I go into devices, I have 6 devices in here and 78 entities. So really cool. Even though they're kind of shoehorning these features or these aspects of TrueNAS into a device, it's a nice way to group them, because if I click on datasets, I can see all of my datasets here and how they're doing. Or if I go into disks, I can see all of my disks here and how they're doing. The same with services. I can see whether or not these services are on or off. Same with apps. I only have one. And the system itself and how it's doing. So really cool. Let's add a couple of these cards to our dashboard. So let's say I just want to keep an eye on my disks. And let's add all of our disks to the dashboard. I'm going to choose my HomeLab dashboard and click Next. It's debatable whether or not you want to show all your disks and the temperature. I think that's pretty interesting for me, so I'll add that to the dashboard. And let's pick a couple more while we're here. Out of system, I think that this is pretty interesting too. I want to add this system card to my dashboard. I'm going to pick HomeLab again, Next, and then add to dashboard. And then for fun, let's pick services. Let's add to dashboard, and let's add it to our HomeLab and click Next and add dashboard. So now let's go check out our dashboard. Cool, you can see here that this one's just called disks and this one's called services. Let's actually rename that so you can kind of see how that works. Disks, let's call this TrueNAS disks. So we can just rename it here. It's pretty simple. TrueNAS disks, and it's giving me the preview on the right. And if you wanted to see something else, you could remove those entities from here or add more entities if you like. But I like kind of seeing all of my disks here and their temperature. So let's save that. Okay, so that's a little bit better looking. Same with services. I mean, you can rename this if you want. I'm going to click done for the sake of this. If you want to see, again, your temperature over time. Hey, it's getting pretty toasty in there. Let's show more and let's see the temperature over time of this disk. Yeah, so this looks pretty interesting. I don't know why it went up a little and down a little and back up, but we're talking the difference between 1 degree Celsius. So not a huge swing. And then if you wanted to see, our TrueNAS system information, pretty cool too. How much storage is free? How much is it transferring on these interfaces? Is the boot pool healthy? Is the boot pool free? And other information. But here on services, you can see which are on and which are off. Another cool thing we can do is get more information about the sensor and place it on the card. So for instance, let's look at our services card right here. I can edit this. And if I want to edit this CIFS label or entity, I can add some secondary information. By default, it's none. That's why we only see one line. But we could say the entity ID, last changed, last updated. Let's do last changed, because that tells me kind of when it booted. But you could do these for all of these if you like. So let's say all of these get a last changed, save, edit. There's got to be an easier way to do this. Last changed, last changed. All right, let's go back. Changed, last changed. What are we missing? Smart. All right, so smart disk checking, last changed. Cool, and if we save it, we can now see we have some more information about this entity. And a lot of these entities will have additional information that you can add to these cards if you like. Nice, so we have TrueNAS. What about an individual service? What if I wanted to monitor Plex itself? So Plex does have an integration in here. So if we go back into settings, go into devices and services, and we add one, we can add a Plex media server integration, and then we'll need to configure it with a token. This is pretty easy to do. Just follow this prompt. It will grab a token from Plex and then apply it to the service so you can use it. But once you have it configured, it will add a lot of entities to your Home Assistant, which is pretty cool. And it will also add a lot of devices to your Home Assistant too. Now it gets kind of weird because they'll list your friend's machine that they use to connect to your Plex as a device in case you wanted to monitor that. And so you're not going to see a lot of stuff on the screen here. I'm going to blank that out. But just know it's kind of weird when you see it at first. I totally ignore it because I don't care about any of that. But what I do care about is adding a card to my Home Assistant. That gives me a little bit of information. So let's do that. So if you filter by your Plex server name, you'll see your Plex server here as a device. If you click on it, you'll see some of the sensors that you can add to your dashboard. Now, you can add a lot of things to your dashboard if you want, but really what I want to see is how many people are watching my Plex server. That gives me a quick heads up on this dashboard to know, can I reboot my Plex server really quick? So if we want to add it to our dashboard, I can click Add to Dashboard. I'm going to add it to our HomeLab dashboard. Click Next, and then let's Add to Dashboard. Let's go back to our dashboard now. This is going to be way at the bottom. Since it's at the bottom, let's see how we rearrange cards. Well, if you edit, you can either type in the number of the order you want, or you could minus and adjust them that way. I feel like sometimes it's easier for me to type in the number because cards jump around. But if you want this first, set it to first and it'll bump all of them down. So let's go back to this card now that we have. So you can see, hey, someone's watching my Plex server. It's actually my wife watching recorded TV. And if you click on it, you could see how many people over time are using your Plex server. I got up to 3. That's pretty good. And if you want to see a specific date range, you could choose it this way like we were for the other thing. So if I wanted to see the last month, you could see I got up to 4 at one time. And if you want to customize this card more, you could. Let's edit this card. If I want to add a new entity, let's search for our Plex entities. And I'm going to add an entity actually from the Docker container. So you could see here that I could build up this card with entities from different devices or different services and build this card to be one card that has all of the information I want. Whereas before I was kind of doing it per integration, you could do this per domain if you want and put all of your Plex stuff here and all of the integrations you have and put them here in your Plex server. And if you had a dedicated server for your Plex server and you wanted to monitor the hardware on a remote machine, you could do that too. You'll see that here in a little bit. But let's add this Docker integration because you know what? Sometimes I just want to restart Plex and I could do it right here since it's a Docker container. Click this, toggle it off, click it, the container will start back up. So pretty cool, real easy way to not only see information about Plex, but something actionable too. Next up is one of the coolest that I think in hacks and in Home Assistant, and that's Proxmox. You can actually add Proxmox to your Home Assistant, which is pretty cool and pretty crazy to think about. Home Assistant has a default kind of generic integration with Proxmox, but if you grab the one from Hacks, it is super awesome. So again, you'll want to click on it, you'll want to install it in Hacks, then you'll go back to Settings, Devices and Services, add integration, you'll search for Proxmox, you'll click it, and then you'll need to add some information about your Proxmox host. Now, you'll want to follow the documentation on this integration because it shows you how to set up an account and a group and some permissions for Home Assistant so that it can do certain things for Proxmox. And it even has a really nice guide on setting up different roles and different groups that you can apply to this user account right here. So I would advise following this. It'll take you about 5 minutes, and you're going to have to decide on how much permissions you want to give this account that can do things within Proxmox. If you want read-only, it's totally doable and it works great. If you want to have a little bit more control and be able to do things like shut machines down or shut containers down, you'll have to give it a little bit more permissions. So see this and see the documentation. But after you get that set up, you'll want to add the username here. You'll want to use the password here, which is the API token, and then you'll want to set the realm. So you have PAM or PVE. I think in the documentation, they say to create one under PVE. And so just make sure that you set the realm to PVE if you're following that documentation. So once you have that added, you want to go into configure and add or remove nodes and VMs and storage and containers. This is where it's really cool. And this is one of the most full-featured integrations that I've seen, that we can actually go through and add all of our nodes. We can add virtual machines. We can add containers. We can add anything we want right through here. And it's pretty awesome. I've only added one node just for the sake of argument. I can add different virtual machines. I've only added 3, so 2 DNS servers and 1 Windows server. And then you can pick which storage you want as well as LXC containers. So if you have LXC, you can. And so I've added the fast pool from all 4 of these machines, and that's the SSD ZFS pool on each of these machines. But you can add anything you want here. So cool. And you can also enable physical disk information too, which I did, which is pretty cool. So once you submit it, you should see different services now in different devices. This is pretty cool because you can see a lot of information about Proxmox that's otherwise kind of hard to get to. You kind of got to dig through stuff. And the mobile experience on Proxmox is not good. Not good. Definitely needs some work. Anyways, that's neither here nor there. If I click on this Stornator node here, you can see that I have lots of sensors. Pretty cool. So how many containers are running? I don't have any running. CPU used, disk used, last boot time, how much memory is free, status, how much memory is free, so on and so forth. So let's add this to the dashboard, add it to my HomeLab dashboard, and let's add it and use that card. Let's add another one while we're here because this gets really cool. Let's say we want to add individual drives. So this is one of those SSD disks, and I can add it to the dashboard, and I could create a dashboard card that had all of these disks together if I wanted. Choose HomeLab, but we'll just do this one. Let's add to dashboard, go back to our dashboard, and now let's check it out. So you can see my Stornator node, my Proxmox node, whether it's running or not, how much CPU is used. Again, all of this stuff is tracked, whether or not it's up to date, how many virtual machines are running. Pretty cool. I did turn a lot of them on just to patch them a little bit ago, hence why my uptime isn't that high. Pretty cool, tracking virtual machines over time. And over here on this individual disk, we can see the temperature of that disk. That's actually, oh, that's Fahrenheit. I was going to say that's pretty warm, but that's Fahrenheit, so that's pretty okay. Health is okay. So the smart checks are checking out. Power cycles, power on hours. These are pretty new disks. And then the wear out. And the wear out over time, which is pretty cool. Now I can track this wear out over a long period of time. I mean, it hasn't even gone up 1% over the last month. No, we're still at 2%. But pretty cool that we can check it. So really cool. Lots of stuff you can do with Proxmox. I encourage you to dive in and I encourage you to customize those. But let's keep moving. One of the other services that I use is PiHole. This gets really cool too. So they have a PiHole integration. If we go into settings, devices and services, add integration, and we can see that PiHole is in here. If you use AdGuard, that's also in here, but I use PiHole, and so I would pick PiHole. So when configuring PiHole, you'll have to enter your information here. It will go out to your PiHole system, prompt you to log in, and then grab a token and save it so it can get this information from your PiHole. And again, follow the documentation. If you ever need to figure out where the documentation is, usually when you open the integration, the question mark is going to take you right there, or it will have it somewhere pretty obvious. But once you have it configured, then again, you get one device. Well, what's my one device? It's my PiHole server. And then you can see all of the entities and controls that are surfaced through this. So pretty cool. So if I wanted to add a PiHole card, I do like that there's that control up there, but let's add this as is first, and then we'll customize it. We want to add this to my HomeLab dashboard. Click Next. And this is all fine. Add to dashboard. Now let's go back to our HomeLab. Let's, again, move this one close to the top because I like PiHole being at the top. Let's say this is number 2. Now it moved it up here. And now let's edit this card. And let's say we want to add one more entity. And do we have a PiHole control? Oh, it's here at the bottom. Anyway, so we have a PiHole switch there. That's what I was going to add. I didn't see it there at the bottom, but that's a good point. If I want to move this item to the top, let's just drag it to the top here. It's almost all the way at the top. So what do I want to see first? I want to see on and off. I do want to see the status. I mean, this is kind of redundant. I mean, do we need to see the status and a toggle? I don't think so. So let's actually get rid of, let me put it at the top first. Let's get rid of the status because, again, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to have them both. Ads block today, I like that. Percentage block, yep. Seeing clients, this is all pretty cool. Let's save this. Pretty cool. We have a PiHole card that not only has a lot of data, but we can also toggle PiHole on and off if you need to. This is the case sometimes when something's getting blocked that I need to get to, and rather than try to troubleshoot it really quickly, I'll toggle PiHole off, do the thing I need to do, and toggle it back on. Pretty cool. So PiHole's here. I kind of saved the best for last. Well, I think the best, I know I said Proxmox is one of the best, but I think that this is one of the coolest ones. And it's adding your router or your firewall. So whether you use pfSense or UniFi, you can add that here and get some really cool metrics that you can then make some really cool cards. So if you're using pfSense, you could grab it right here and add this integration if you want. And you'll get lots of information, and you'll get lots of metrics, and you'll get lots of controls, which is pretty cool. You'll need to follow those instructions, but I use a UDM Pro. So if I go to add integrations and I go to Ubiquity, they have quite a few in here. So you can choose between network, protect, AP, LED. I'm not going to do any of that, but mine is UniFi Network. I also have Protect, but I'm not going to add it. Then if you click on it, it will be configured, and you're going to have a lot of information. But before you have a lot of information, you also need to set it up, and so you'll need to add a username and password to actually do this. So again, there are instructions on how to do this, but you'll want to create a local account on that device with a secure username and password that probably only has read access. It's kind of up to you. Follow the documentation on how you want to configure that. I recommend read-only access to network. But once you have that configured, it's going to ask you a lot of questions, and it's going to create a lot of entries. So kind of be prepared. But first, it's going to ask, hey, do you want to create entries from network clients? I said no here because I don't want to create devices for every real device that I have on there. Then you can choose whether or not you want to track network devices. So Ubiquity devices, I want to see those. You can choose whether or not you want to track clients on different wireless networks or on wired networks. There's a lot in here. I didn't choose any of those. Then you can create switches for some of these devices. I think this is to block the actual device. I don't want to do anything like that. If this sounds interesting to you, I would definitely check out the documentation and see what a switch does. There's lots of stuff that it can do depending on the type of device that it is. This is pretty full featured. Then whether or not you want to add bandwidth sensor usage to each network client, which is pretty awesome. And then uptime sensors too, which I did, which is pretty cool again. And when you're done, you're going to have a lot of entities like I do. Maybe. I don't know if you're going to have that many, but I have 1,300 entities, all things I can track and look at and get information from. And it's a little bit overwhelming. But the cool thing is I can also now track the network usage of individual devices. Now I can do that in UniFi again, like I can do all of this and UniFi Network, but I want to bring this into Home Assistant. So if I kind of look and I see, hey, how much, let's see some of these devices. Yeah, you're seeing all my devices. Well, like, where's my DNS server? I'm sure that's getting a lot of little traffic. Let's filter here. It's Quasar, weird name. But you can see here how much it's transmitting and receiving over time, which is pretty cool. And it does this for all of your network clients if you want. And again, you could see this over time too, right? If I want to see this over time and see how much bandwidth this client has used, you could see it right here. Pretty awesome, pretty cool. But what if I want to see information about, say, the UDM itself? I could see what site it is, that's a unified term, the CPU utilization, how much memory is being used, the state itself, uptime last month. I think it's around 50 days. It's kind of weird that this card says it that way, but I think it's 50-ish days. And then the current WAN up and WAN down. So really awesome. So if I wanted to add this card right here to my dashboard, pretty cool. Pretty easy. We just add it to the dashboard and add to dashboard. And I do want to put this one closer to the top. So let's say this by Home Network. It doesn't need to be called Home Network. I'm going to call this my UDM. Really, it's an SE. Put that there and save. And let's put it as number 1 and then done. This all looks nice, but let's add some better looking widgets for things we really care about. So what's something I really care about? Well, I really care about how much WAN up and down is being used for my whole home. So let's create a quick card for that, and I'll show you how to make some custom cards. So we're going to edit our dashboard. Let's add a card, and let's add a gauge right here. So if we add a gauge, we don't want HomeLab temperature. Let's choose, I think it's going to be called UDM. It's not UDM. I think it was called Home Network. Yeah, so Home Network. A little bit confusing sometimes. You kind of have to figure out how they name these entities. Even though mine's a UDM Pro, my UDM Pro is named Home Network, so I know which one it is in my site manager. So anyways, mine's called Home Network. And so let's see we don't want network state up and down. Let's see the current. Oh, I remember. So this is where it gets a little bit confusing too. I remember I ran into this earlier. So if we look at the sensor right here, it says WAN up and WAN down. Now it doesn't say that out of the box. I actually had to find the port on the switch, so the port number, and then label it WAN up and WAN down for the transmit and receive. So I'll show you how to do this because you're going to need to do this too. But first you want to find your router or your firewall. Mine's called Home Network to make it even more confusing. Mine's called Home Network. Once you click on there, you can see I have some entities here that aren't shown. Now, at first, these weren't named WAN download and WAN upload. They were named the port name. And so I had to find the port on my UDM Pro that the WAN port maps to. It was port 9. And then once I found port 9, I renamed it to WAN. So once I found that it was named port 9, TX and RX, I couldn't rename it here. What I had to do is find the actual entity itself, and it was called port 9. Imagine this was it, and I would have a transmit and receive. Now, you might have multiple port 9s, right? Because you have multiple switches, but you can see here that this is mapped to server room Pro 48 PoE. So that's my 48 Pro PoE switch. So that's not it. What I had to do was, I think I looked for home_network. And then once you filter on it, it makes it a little bit easier to see, and you can see these devices, and then you can rename it the way that you want to. And you can see I renamed this port 9. The RX is the receive or the download, and the port 9 TX or the transfer is the upload. Now, if I ever change from port 9 to port 10, then I'll have to go and rename this. You might have something that looks like RX and TX in yours, and that's probably what I should have done. Now that I see this, maybe this is what I should have used. Let me enable. I'm going to enable this entity, and I'm going to say, hey, start tracking this, enable it, update, because I have a feeling now this is probably like the virtual interface for WAN, which makes a whole lot more sense, because if I ever changed, WAN from port 9 to port 10, then I would have to redo this. I think this might be the way to go. But again, either way is going to work. You're just going to have to play with it and figure it out. So anyways, the reason we were doing all of this is because we wanted to add a new gauge card. So let's add a card. Let's add a gauge. So let's look for WAN upload. And here it is. It's port 9. So upload is transmit. And if we wanted to name it something other than WAN upload, we could say ISP upload, and that would work too. And you can adjust some stuff here. What's the minimum? What's the maximum you want to show? For me, I have 0 to 500 megabit, kind of slow compared to a lot of people. You could display it as a needle if you want. You could also define severity, which I find pretty cool. So I'm going to say from 0 up until 200 is green. Once we go over 200, then we're yellow. And then let's say once we get to, I don't know, 400, then we're in the red. So pretty cool. So this will change colors according to speed. You can see the live readout right now. And then, what you want the tap behavior to do. The default is more info, which will show you the chart. And from there, you can drill in to give it a date range. So I'm going to keep that. So let's save. And then it added down here. We want this to be our number 1 position because this one's cool. And let's add another one. So since we have the upload, let's add our download too. So let's add another gauge, and we want our download. So WAN download. I'm going to call this ISP download just for consistency, and then define severity. Let's do the same thing. I think I did I can't remember, 300, I think, and then 400. Good enough. And then save. And then let's again move this all the way to the top. Let's say this is number 2. So here we go. So now these are looking pretty good. If we click into here, we can see the history. Cool. And if I test my internet speed really quick and go back to here, we should see right here, hey, my download, did I not spike up to yellow or red? Maybe I did. And it samples. There we go. We're up to red. So yeah, I'm using all of my download right now, but pretty cool. Let's test our upload now. Now this should flip-flop back. There we go. Our upload. It's going to yellow. So it was 200. Then it should probably go to red, and now I'm kind of using all of my upload here at home. And there are lots of other cards you can configure too. Let's say I wanted to create, a glance card, and I wanted to see CPU on Docker, memory on Docker, and Docker receive, and Docker transmit. We could very easily, just like that. And you can choose whether or not you want to show the name, show the icon, show the state. I like them all there. And then save. Move this to the top. Let's say this is number 3. And here we go. It's right here. There are so many integrations that you could do. If you wanted to monitor individual machines, like a Windows machine, you totally could. Here's a bonus one for you. You could do it with something like System Bridge. System Bridge is an agent that you install on a Windows or Linux machine or any kind of machine, I think even Mac, and it will expose metrics so that Home Assistant can connect to them. And this is a first-class integration, so if we went into devices and services and we did an add integration and we looked for System Bridge, we would find it. And then in System Bridge, you would connect to each machine. Now, each machine you have, you'll have to run this again. You'll have to get a token from that machine, which is in the documentation, and then this will connect to it. And then once you go into the machine, I just had to turn this machine on, you can see all of the information about it. Now, this is a Windows machine, so you can see the C drive. You can see information about the CPU that's being used, the load, how much memory is free, whether or not it's pending a reboot, whether or not it's up to date, and the version of the System Bridge that it's using. And you also get events like it powered on and powered off. So from this, we can create yet another card. If we want to add this big card to our dashboard, we could. Next. And if we go back to our HomeLab dashboard, we should see it now, this gigantic card that has all of this information about it. That supports all of the same things that we support with other things, even how many processes are being used. Now, there are so many more integrations you can use with Home Assistant that has nothing to do with IoT devices, as you just saw, and you can continue to build out a monitoring system or even just a dashboard for all of your HomeLab services. One thing that I didn't touch on, though, is that now that we have all of these monitored, you can actually take actions based on them. For instance, in automation, if we wanted to add an automation when that Windows machine had a camera that turned on and was in use, you can then do something like open my garage door. I could do it. I have the ability to do it here. but that's not something you would want to do. But my point is, now that we have all these additional sensors and metrics within Home Assistant, we can take action on them. And those actions don't actually have to be IoT things at all. I could power off another machine if my Windows machine turns on, or turn on the lights, or turn off all of my Docker containers on this server when this server powers on. So some pretty cool and powerful stuff. So as you saw today, we built a dashboard from Home Assistant for all of our HomeLab services. We get to track some of these metrics over time, and we even get to interact with some of those services too. If you haven't done any monitoring or metrics with other systems for your HomeLab, I think that this is a quick and robust way to do it. Not to mention, you get a pretty good looking app too. So what service do you use to monitor your HomeLab services? Are you able to automate things based on that? Could you see using Home Assistant as your HomeLab assistant? Let me know in the comments below. I'm Tim. Thanks for watching.